In the Unresolved Problems segment tonight, the Council on American Islamic Relations wanted me punished for speaking honestly about how I feel when I see people in Muslim garb at the airport. Megyn Kelly spoke to a leader of their group yesterday.
Everyone is recognizing now that perhaps it wasn't a good fit between the network and Mr. Williams.
Why is that? Why is that? Because you're not allowed to express your honest opinions?
No, because he had views on a number of issues that didn't reflect the viewpoint of the station.
Is it more of a service to this nation if you allow honest, non-bigoted men like Juan Williams to express their concerns and then have an open dialogue about how we can get past that? Or is it better to stifle that free speech and opinion by firing him?
We can have an open dialogue, and that's exactly what a dialogue is. It's give and take. He says something, we react to it. You seem to think that only he should be able to say something and we shouldn't react to it. Is that your definition of a dialogue?
Seems to me Mr. Hooper was actually looking to shut down the dialogue. But some American Muslims want us to be sincere about our feelings so we can have an honest discussion. And joining us now, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Dr. Jasser, when you hear this kind of rhetoric that somehow suggests that, yeah, we have the right to respond to Juan Williams and then they have the right to fire him, doesn't that say we're shutting down the dialogue?
Well, Juan, you know, all I can tell you is welcome to our world, and that you are collateral damage in a war of ideas where groups like CAIR that come out of the ideology of political Islam are all about diversionary tactics, about avoiding the real problem that we have in our ideology of theopolitical transnational movement that includes groups like the Brotherhood that many of these groups were hatched from. So they're all about diverting it, talking about Islamophobia, talking about bigotry, when in fact they are wanting to divert it from, you know, the issue of fear that you so appropriately brought up is just the first layer of the discussion, because deeper within that is the root cause of terrorism, which is an ideology that feeds that, and groups like CAIR don't want to talk about reform. They don't want to acknowledge that, you know, he in this interview with Megyn continued to talk about Muslim concerns that he represents. Well, we're a diverse community that's represented by, I think, most American Muslims that aren't victim mongers, that take seriously our responsibility for reform and are going to listen to your entire interview and realize that the vast majority of what you says acknowledges that Muslims have equal rights, but also acknowledge a reality of fear that needs a deeper treatment.
Well, you know what was striking to me was listening to him say that somehow anybody who has different views should not be allowed on NPR because NPR should represent only one slice of the spectrum. I wonder if this isn't some kind of Islamic law. Is that what he's saying, that it should be that you must represent a specific point of view? You can't have a full-throated, full-hearted dialogue that includes all point of views. And he says that I shouldn't be on NPR if I diverge from their perspective.
Exactly. I mean, this is the issue, is that constantly they don't make statements about the limitation of free speech when Muslims are a majority. That happens in Iran or Saudi Arabia or elsewhere. And the interesting thing is how he kept saying how you diverted, Juan, from the NPR ideology. Interestingly, though, their ideology internally is about anti-feminism, anti-gay rights, and other issues that I just can't understand how the left at NPR even tolerates with groups like CAIR, because they're not looking into the depth of how they treat internally, which is within the House of Islam, that many of us want to reform. And by focusing just on minority issues and Islamophobia, we're not even getting past the gates in the reform we have to have within the community.
But now, Dr. Jasser, here's the thing. These folks are celebrating. These folks are having a party tonight because they say they got rid of Juan Williams at NPR. NPR danced their tune. They won. And I'm going to ask you this. Now, is this the way that you think that the Islamic community in the United States feels good, that they're somehow advancing their cause with the American people by limiting a sincere, serious discussion about terrorism and its links to the Muslim community, specifically radical extremist Muslims?
Juan, I can't tell you how important this issue that you just asked is because they may be dancing, but they don't represent the American Muslim communities that I know. We are a diverse community. The vast majority of us realize that this is destroying American opinion about Muslims and how relevant Americans feel we are to the solution. Most of us realize that this is a Muslim problem that needs a Muslim solution. It's not the Islam I practice, it's not the Islam most Muslims I know practice, but it is an Islamic problem that only we can fix. I'll remind you of Nidal Hasan. Nidal Hasan was ignored by most of his colleagues, not because he didn't have any signs of radicalization that his fellow officers feared, but because they were worried that the same thing would happen to them that happened to you. And most of us Muslims are horrified, and we don't have our head in the sand like CAIR. We're not trying to divert and avoid the real reforms. That I'll tell you, there are many other Muslims like myself. We formed an American Islamic Leadership Coalition of other organizations that don't toe the line of the Muslim Brotherhood and their ideas.
But Dr. Jasser,
like
one last quick question for you. When you look at the kind of rhetoric that was coming from the Times Square bomber, where he talks about a Muslim war, the first drop of blood, doesn't CAIR have any response to that? They get me fired, but where is their response to a man who's trying to blow up Times Square?
They don't have a response. Why? Because it involves them deconstructing their whole modus operandi, which is that faith, mosque, and government are mixed. In order to fix the problem of that Muslim soldier that mixes the Islamic State with government, where this society to him is an anathema, we have to separate mosque and state and go through modernity, go through an enlightenment process that delegitimizes their entire ideology of existence.
Dr.
And CAIR,
Jasser,
MPAC, and other groups
let me
don't want
tell
to
you
deal with
something.
it.
You are in the good fight. We don't hear enough about people like you taking the fight to the bad guys. Thank you very much for what you're doing. Keep it up.
Absolutely. Thank you for waking up America, Juan.
You're plenty more ahead as the factor moves along this evening.